Well, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to this virtual event to introduce and launch the Ingham Institute Centre for Robotics and Health Technology. My name's Daryl Harkness. I'm the CEO at the Ingham Institute, and I'll be your MC this morning. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the many lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. And as we talk about solving issues in health, I reflect on the fact that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been teaching and healing on these lands for more than 40,000 years. We've had an excellent response to this event today with people joining us from Australia, obviously, but also from New Zealand and a number of countries in Asia. So as I said, a very warm welcome. And I'm sure that's linked to the three outstanding speakers that will be coming up to the podium in a few minutes. And our speakers will bring many different perspectives. As they come up, I'll read their bio and formally introduce them. But I do want to thank our speakers up front. And we're particularly honoured to have Professor Hugh Durrant-Whyte, the New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer, join us. We know he's very busy and we're very grateful. My good friend, Professor Les Bokey, our Research Director of the Ingham Institute. He will talk about the new centre. And then Dr Sarah McDonald from Baymatob, the CEO and founder of Baymatob, will speak about her fascinating and inspirational journey. And coincidentally, we're actually here at the Baymatob offices, and we're very grateful for the use of their space. It just worked perfectly for us today. So what we'll do now is we'll have a short message from Dr Amanda Larkin. And Amanda is a great friend of the Ingham Institute. She sits on our Sydney LHD, and they're very, very good friends. So with that, if we could run the video, please.
I'm delighted to be here for the launch of the Ingham Institute Centre for Robotics and Health Technologies. The Ingham Institute and South Western Sydney Local Health District have a long and deep relationship, and this has enabled the translation of research into clinical practice into many areas across the health service. 2020 has been a time of significant change, and the impact of COVID has driven us to look at different ways of providing health care. Robotics and health technologies will support these changes, and we anticipate that through the centre there'll be the opportunities for clinical trials and a lot of research work that will be able to change the way that we deliver care, the way that care is provided to our patients, and what we anticipate is the improvement of health outcomes for the people of the South West.
So thank you, Amanda. And Amanda would have loved to join us today. As you'd expect, Amanda wears many hats, and she was at a board meeting which she couldn't change. But there is no greater supporter of research in South West Sydney than Amanda Larkin. She invests time and energy and really supports us in the best way possible. So thank you, Amanda. We're very, very grateful. So our first speaker today is Professor Hugh Durrant-Whyte. Hugh is the New South Wales Chief Scientist and Engineer and the Natural Resources Commissioner. And I'm sure Hugh is known to many of you. As you'd expect, he is very, very active in the innovation space, among others. From 2016 to 2018, Hugh was Chief Scientist, a Scientific Advisor to the UK Ministry of Defence. From 2014 to 2016, and from 2002 to 2010, he was a Professor and ARC Federation Fellow at the University of Sydney. And from 2010 to 2014, he was CEO of National ICT Australia. And from 1995 to 2010, Director of the ARC Centre of Excellence for Autonomous Systems and of the Australian Centre for Field Robotics. Hugh is a world-leading authority on machine learning and robotics and applications in areas including cargo handling, mining and defence. He's published over 300 research papers, graduated over 70 PhD students, I think he knows Sarah quite well, one of our other speakers, and has won numerous awards and prizes for his work, including being named 2010 Scientist of the Year and 2008 Engineers Australia New South Wales Engineer of the Year. In his career, he has worked with many major companies and has co-founded 3 successful startups. He's particularly well known for his work with Patrick in delivering the automated container terminals in Brisbane and Port Botany, and for his work with Rio Tinto in pioneering and delivering the automated mine of the future. And Hugh may not even remember this well, but he visited the Ingham Institute and Liverpool Hospital probably 18 months ago, and gave us some very candid feedback about a number of things, but the discussion we remember most was around robotics and health technologies. And he encouraged us to build on what we were doing and start this centre. So Hugh, for that we also thank you and look forward to your address this morning. Thank you.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, and yes, I do remember 18 months ago coming to visit the Ingham Institute and to really see what was going on, and also to suggest that I think there were huge opportunities to focus in particular technical areas where you were already looking strong. And I think this comes to the whole technical piece in health. I have to start, I guess, on a slightly negative note before I get to the positive side. About a year ago or so, I listened to the head of health at Microsoft give a speech about medical technologies and particularly medical data. And he started his talk and said, look, if I'd known 30 years ago how little progress we would have made, I would have done something different. And in many senses, that is an issue in the health area. You know, we talk a lot about the application of data science, sensing technology, AI, and lots of other new techniques, but it's really been a little bit of a struggle to make sure that those technologies have perhaps been taken up in the medical domain in the way perhaps they've been taken up in, let us say, defence or other areas. Having said that, there is a window, a door opening at the moment, I think, due to COVID, potentially, for the introduction of new technologies, for, if you like, a little bit more of the acceptance around that. And I will also say, I think Australia and Sydney in particular has ended up in a very well-positioned place, I think, for really developing that. So let me just get a little bit knee-deep into some of the technical areas. I think it's great that we're here today at Baymatob, and that Sarah, I wasn't actually one of her professors because I'd given up teaching by that point, but she certainly was part of the department that I led at the time, is exactly at that kind of sensing AI technology area where I think there's an awful lot to be done. So I think the first thing to say about medical technologies is really the application and the use of much tighter sensing technologies, diagnostic information, the use of software, machine learning. I hesitate to say AI, but those sorts of technologies for really using data to make better diagnosis, to assist doctors in actually being able to deliver outcomes to patients in so much better ways. And one of my small little jobs that I do on the side is I chair the Medical Devices Fund for the Office of Health and Medical Research, and Baymatob is actually one of the companies that we support, but that gives you an indication. We have supported over the years, I think, about 37 companies, and we have put $50 million into those companies overall, but those companies have gone out and raised $800 million in venture capital separately and have really done a stunning job. In fact, I might mention one that IPO'd, I think about a month ago now, Clean Space Technologies. Only 2 years ago, we put a certain amount of funding into that company. It IPO'd last month for $500 million. So it really is an opportunity not just for delivering good outcomes, and I admit Clean Space, who build wearable ventilators, were in a prime position when COVID came, but also the fact that there is the skills and technology that we can build on in Sydney and related areas, I think, to do that. I think the other area that's interesting to me is material science. And again, there are companies like Saluda Medical that, again, MDF has supported over the years. And Saluda Medical actually spun out of National ICT Australia when I was running National ICT Australia. And again, that's about materials technology to a great degree. It's about implantable devices, different ways of weaving different types of anodes and electrodes and using that to control and manage stimulus and manage pain in different types of patients. And again, again, fantastic technology that's really matured in so many different ways. But materials for implants, materials for sensing technology and implantables, great areas where, again, there's a lot of strength in different Sydney-based universities and across indeed the country that are really ready to be used profitably in the medical sector. I think another area that's of interest is really robotics. And again, this is my background. Australia has led the way in the commercial application of robotics in large-scale areas like mining and cargo handling and agriculture and so on. But the opportunities for using robotics in medicine are manifold. Again, it's the precision, it's the repeatability, it's the way in which it can augment surgeons and be used profitably, and also I think to deliver a better outcome for patients is there. The opportunity is there. It's not yet been delivered though. And I think this is the issue that we now face in the community. All these technologies, data, sensing, robotics, materials, great technologies, great smart people, indeed Baymatob where we're sitting today. And really now it's up to ourselves to work with our local area health districts, with the health departments and so on, to build that pipeline, to build not just the technology, but how we do the trials program, how we really implement, how we use, how we better get outcomes, how we make more cost-effective health decisions in general based on that technology. So again, I'm really pleased actually to see today the Ingham Institute and Baymatob and this kind of supply chain really developing so that we genuinely can create not just those outcomes, but actually really build that industry and what we could really do for it. So the Ingham Institute and its focus, I think, now on robotics and technology in many different areas is a great outcome because it's exactly the kind of supply chain we need to really get good patient and get good commercial and company outcomes for what we're doing in New South Wales. So I will continue through the Medical Devices Fund to support these great technologies and really try and build the teams. And I must say, I think having clinicians and hospitals and local area health districts involved is absolutely critical. I think people sometimes forget in the Medical Devices Fund that it was originally set up not just to start up companies, but to deliver good outcomes for the health system in New South Wales as well. And I think the other part of that is really creating the right environment where startup companies, where smart students, where even people from school can all come together to really see what could be done around this sort of technology out into the future. I think COVID has really given us a huge opportunity in the digital and AI space in particular, but I also think in lots of other areas around the acceptance of devices and new ways of operating in health. So congratulations on getting this underway, Les. It's always slightly unusual when you realise someone listened to what I said and my advice. So I appreciate that as well. Thank you very much and good luck with the new institute.
Thank you, Hugh. We appreciate your encouragement, but we also appreciate the work you're doing and the government is doing to invest. We also hear your messages. There is many wonderful things in place. It feels like everything's in front of us, but there's a lot to do to really deliver on this. So we hope that this centre can play an important role. So our next speaker is Professor Les Bokey, and Les, apart from being a good friend, is a passionate researcher and invested in helping patients. He's known for bold ideas. A lot of people have bold ideas, but he gets the ideas done. And we're grateful to have you as our Research Director, Les. So Les is Foundation Professor of Surgery and Clinical Dean for Western Sydney Uni at Liverpool Hospital. He's Director of Research for South West Sydney Local Health District, and of course his favourite role is Director of Research at the Ingham Institute for Applied Medical Research. He's also Director of Surgery for Liverpool Hospital, so he wears many hats, but I think that ties into what Hugh was saying, bringing all these areas together for the best outcome. His research interests include screening and early diagnosis of bowel cancer outcomes after surgery for bowel cancer, inflammatory bowel disease, and robotics and automation in health. He's Director of the South West Sydney Institute for Robotics and Automation in Health and has been for some time. He also leads our recently formed Ingham Institute Centre for Robotics and Health Technology. His expertise and technical innovations, especially in rectal cancer surgery, are acknowledged internationally. Professor Bokey has worked in many centres globally, including the Cleveland Clinic Foundation, and before joining Western Sydney University, he was Head of Surgery Faculty of Medicine and Associate Dean of Surgical Sciences at Sydney University. So welcome, Professor Bokey.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you, Hugh. In particular, I'd like to thank Amanda Larkin, who is the Chief Executive of Southwestern Sydney LHD. And as you mentioned, Hugh, if we're going to develop technology, we have to develop technology that is meaningful to patient outcomes. And the Ingham Institute is probably one of the very, very few medical research institutes which is very, very closely linked to the LHD. And they often say that the LHD and the Ingham Institute, Southwest Sydney LHD, are joined at the hip. And we are. We're all five-legged people walking around. But it's a wonderful example of how technology, research, and patient care can join hands. And I think thinking about what you were saying, Hugh, that's absolutely essential. There's no point in inventing unless you can translate, and unless you can translate in a meaningful way to improve patient outcomes and patient health. So just a little bit of history about robotics. I've been interested in robotics since many, many years. In fact, 30-odd years ago, I suggested to Sydney University that we should propose a centre for robotics and minimally invasive surgery. In 1921, however, that's before I was born, the concept of robotics was imagined by Karol Kapec, a Czech playwright who penned a science fiction play about what he called robotas. These were artificial human-like slaves. Robota means slaves in Czechoslovakian, which were designed and manufactured from synthetic organic matter to supply, Hugh, in your words, consistent and precision work for their human masters, with an emphasis of consistency and precision. The plot in the play thickens with a robot rebellion. They were tired of them doing all the work and the humans doing nothing, and which this led to the extinction of the human race in that play. And a new race developed as male and female robots developed feelings and fell in love with each other, the new Adam and Eve story. I bring that play up because science fiction and art often intersect with and translate into reality. We think that science and medicine comes out of hospitals, but often it comes out of culture, as Daryl mentioned, the Aboriginal culture. It comes out of art, it comes out of imagination. Imagination leads to scientific development. If you can't imagine, you can't develop. You're stuck in the same spot that you've always been. 100 years later, after this play was written, precision and automation have become commonplace in everyday life and have been adopted wholeheartedly in just about every industry, as Hugh has mentioned, from aviation to food processing. Health is catching up after a slow run, but COVID has changed this to a 100-meter sprint. These last 12 months have seen us catapulted into imagination and the use of technology that already exists. We don't really need to imagine, we just need to look at the shelf at what already exists. I've had an interest in robotics since the early 90s, as I mentioned earlier on, when minimally invasive or keyhole surgery was introduced. My interest was piqued when I met a biomedical engineer from MIT in the United States who was developing what she called micro-robots. I was having dinner at a round table with all the other scientists and doctors and what have you, and this young lady was inventing micro-robots. These were 8mm robots fueled by, she told me, molecular engines. In my imagination, I thought then, and still think now, that these could be developed into multifunctional disposable units, with an emphasis on disposable, which could be inserted or injected and remotely controlled to perform diagnostic and therapeutic tasks. We're still not there, but judging by the human ability to translate imagination into action, we're not too far away. Give it a few more years and we will get there. I'd like to shrink a little bit more and maybe become one of those micro-robots myself. Over the past 5 years, there has been a significant interest in health technologies and robotics. At Liverpool Hospital, with the help of South West Sydney LHD, we have lined up an impressive surgical robotic team capable of using precise, consistent technology, using 3D vision. I've been a surgeon for a long time. To do something with 3D vision is quite a thrill. To perform intricate heart and lung surgery, urological, gynecological procedures, and surgery for head and neck and bowel cancer, my own specialty. Anywhere in the body which is narrow and tight, robotic hands, which are 5 millimeter in dimension, can fit much easier than the human hand. As a leading teaching hospital, however, we are committed not just to use these things, but to critically evaluate these technologies, as Hugh has just mentioned. There's no point in just using technology, you've got to evaluate it and identify its effectiveness, its value to our community, and its cost effectiveness. And this requires a teaching hospital environment with the capacity of clinical trials. And that's why the Ingham Institute, being joined at the hip to the LHD, has got that capacity. And we're involved in training and credentialing. It's very, very important that we do have formal training and credentialing programs so that we don't mistake technology with efficacy. It's got to be proven. And this can only come from a teaching hospital with clinical trials. Whereas surgical robots have attracted our attention, and certainly mine, they by no means dominate the headlines, and they by no means dominate the research plans of the Ingham Institute. The vision that I have and we share at the Ingham Institute for the Centre for Robotics and Health Technologies is far broader than surgical robots, and it's more ambitious than this. Technologies are at the forefront of our plans. Around the world, and certainly in Australia, there are any number of fertile minds in engineering, architecture, the fine arts, mathematics, music, and computer sciences, imagining and developing the future. Much of this is occurring in many different industries. The focus now is on health. And COVID-19 has pushed, or should I say, has shoved us into the future. And about time too. The changes that are being imagined and implemented are compelling, and there is no stopping or going back. In fact, those who go back, or those who even stand still, will be left behind. Sadly, much of the work being done in this field is done in isolation. Individuals and groups working separately with no apparent research coordination, and little or no industry involvement. Who's going to produce these technological advances if it's not partnerships with industries? To date, there is no single significant research centre which brings them together to maximise their research potential and productivity. There's lots of talk, let's get together, but there ain't no centre to do that. 2 years ago, we at the Ingham Institute, following, I must say, a visit by you, Hugh, where you encouraged us to, that's not a bad idea, you said, and I thought so too. We started to change this. Our intention was integration and breaking down of silos. under the one roof, my vision for the Centre for Robotics and Health Technologies, and shared by our staff at the Ingham, by the board and by the Chief Executive Officer. Under the one roof, the Centre has brought together a growing number of clinicians, engineers, scientists, and importantly, industry to research, inquire, and evaluate existing, new, and developing health technologies. These include automated systems to facilitate seamless navigation of patient journeys, robotically assisted tasks such as lifting of patients, food distribution, pharmacy dispensing, and many other tasks that place a heavy burden on patient care. These technologies already exist. They're on the shelf. And they exist in many industries, including transport and aviation and mining. They're now finally ready to be adapted to health. Already and almost on a weekly basis, the Centre is approached by individuals, by startups, as well as established industries. Many of the individuals are young researchers who've heard of us somewhere along the line and say, can we come and talk to you? What a great thing to have. Great minds, imagination coming to talk to us. So we have been asked to, for example, evaluate potentially to evaluate technologies which could potentially assist in allied health, nursing and midwifery. In particular, we have been invited to participate in the evaluation of robotically assisted care for elderly patients and those with various brain injuries and dementia. It just so happens that because of our relationship to the LHD, we've got a very significant brain injury centre and a significant neurological clinical centre. There comes the synergy of research and clinical care and clinical trials. Over the past 2 years, and especially over the COVID period, we have gained experience in the use of remote sensing devices for cardiac conditions and for remote monitoring of COVID patients or those who've been exposed to COVID in their homes. COVID-19 has accelerated the concept of virtual care, virtual intensive care, telehealth, and we are pursuing these with our clinical partners across Southwest Sydney, LHD, and beyond. Another important development is the use of robotic-assisted interventional cardiology and neuroradiology to deliver precise insertion of stents and clot retrievals for stroke patients. We just happen to have a unique stroke centre chaired by a new professor of stroke medicine who is also interested in that. Clinical research, clinical trials, the triangle is there. These technologies ensure precision and enhanced professional performance as the operator is controlling the robot at arm's length and in a comfortable working posture and environment, rather than standing there for hours on end wearing a very heavy lead suit at a funny angle, very uncomfortable. With the advent of 5G connectivity, we have started to plan and examine the role of remote robotic diagnostics and interventional procedures. This is the future. It's almost there. Let's grab it and run with it. This is particularly relevant to a country as vast as Australia, where specialist interventional services can be brought remotely to the patient and to the community. In addition, we are exploring the place of mobile scanning, machine learning, and remote robotic intervention in stroke patients and clot retrieval. That same concept could potentially be applicable to other conditions, including cardiac, vascular conditions, and so on and so forth. Technologies are being developed by some of our clinicians to monitor and manage patients in the community rather than in hospital. These are aimed at patients with chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hepatitis C, and inflammatory bowel disease. We just happen to have them ready in our own Southwest Sydney LHD, and that is a gift. Finally, we're in the process of evaluating the use of remote virtual reality to train professionals to perform surgical and other interventional procedures. Tele Monitoring is just being developed by several companies, and one in particular overseas. It allows a surgeon or interventionist to remotely view what another doctor is looking at some distance, and to assist in providing expert advice remotely. When I suggested that 25 years ago, that we could do a keyhole procedure in Australia and that the surgeon could be in San Francisco, I think it was thought that I needed to go and see a psychiatric person, but I didn't. I married one instead. Just imagine how this can be used to treat patients locally rather than having to be transported to a central hospital. This is the vision for the Ingham Centre for Robotics and Health Technologies. And we are fortunate because we've got university partners, Western Sydney University, University of New South Wales, Sydney University, UTAS and the University of Wollongong within the Ingham Institute. And we've got a southwestern Sydney local health district, as I said, that is extraordinary, partnering with us for many, many years. So eventually we hope to make our contribution, first of all, to serve our local community, our national community, but we have vision for serving the global community. And I thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Les, and you heard Les speak with a passion, and many of the things he spoke about, as you picked up from his presentation, are already projects and initiatives that are well and truly underway. So very exciting times. And the other thing I would say about Les is that as people come to work with us, he gets involved with every single one. You heard his CV, wears many hats, but he gets involved with every single organisation that comes to work with us. So thank you, Les. So now we're going to hear from someone who is actually working in this space, a CEO and founder, a lady called Dr Sarah McDonald, who heads up Baymatob. And Sarah's story is a fascinating one. She will, I'll give away a little in the bio, but Sarah's a mechatronic engineer, and as I said, founder and CEO of Baymatob. She started working in the obstetric technology space after the traumatic birth of her second child, Oliver. During the process of Oliver's birth, Sarah was attached to the industry standard CTG monitoring. And not only did Sarah find the CTG cumbersome, restrictive and highly invasive on her birthing process, it was clear that the physiological signs it reported did not really aid the clinician in understanding what was happening during Oliver's birth. Determined to improve the technology available for obstetric monitoring, Sarah embarked on a PhD focused on understanding the normal progression of labour. Sarah's PhD was awarded the Dr Albert S. McKern Research Scholarship and resulted in the development of OLLY, an innovative, non-invasive device to monitor pregnancy and labour progression. As CEO of Baymatob, Sarah has successfully led the company to obtain over $4.7 million in non-dilutive funds and has received a range of awards and progressed the development of this technology to where it is today. And as I said, we're actually in fact, we've taken over Baymatob's main room here, their open plan area. But one of the things you notice as soon as you walk in is the buzz and the energy right across the team. You know, it's just fun to be around people doing amazing things in the startup space. So Sarah, we're looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you for hosting us.
Thank you, Daryl. One thing I do want to preface this with is a lot of what we are, in fact, all of what we are is not just Sarah. It's along the way, the foundation has been set, is a lot of partners throughout it. We've had funding partners through the MDF. We've had a lot of clinicians supporting us across districts within New South Wales and internationally. And we have an absolutely incredible team here of 13, mix of engineers, quality, administration and executive running this show that's just blows my mind. I think that foundation is really, really important to talk about when we're talking about the centre and the launch of the centre today. Is one thing I said to both Daryl and Les, was, I wish this centre was around 20 years ago. And the reason for that was what Baymatob is today and has built up for started initially pre the birth of my son. It started back in undergrad days, mechatronics at University of Sydney. My father had Parkinson's disease and I had no idea what path I could take, and I had no path that I could visibly see to follow to help him using my technical skills. And it was out of coincidence that through the Australian Centre of Field Robotics that was there at the time, there was an individual who specialised in medical technology and advancements, Dr Graham Brooker. And it was knowing that individual that helped me realise that an idea of how I could help in that space could then lead to actually starting to prototype some stuff up and then connect with clinicians. As opposed to in the future, I hope this centre will help actually draw out that path and help introduce people along that path in a much more efficient and supported way. From there, doing my undergrad, I then had the traumatic birth experience of my second child. Because I'd already tread that path once to a limited point with Parkinson's disease, I at least had an idea of how we could take Ollie, our non-invasive device to monitor pregnancy and labour progression, to the next level. Re-engaging in that research area, partnering with the supervisors, Graham, John, Hala, at that initial research stage, and bringing it out to actually gain the data to show what was possible using these new sensing techniques within pregnant women across gestation periods and in labour. From there, that gave us a platform in our foundation to be able to seek funding, where we were introduced to the Medical Device Fund. That enabled us and gave us something that previously, in terms of early stage technology, tends to sit in the research world. It gave us a platform and an ability to take this to a next level and branch out to Baymatob. All of these connections and foundations are vital, but at the moment they tend to be things that people have to map out through their current connections and processes, as opposed to through a united centre that has all those links. This is what I hope is being introduced with this centre. For where Baymatob is today, as I've said, it's a lot more than my own personal experience. It's expanded to a team that is passionate and focused on improving healthcare outcomes for mothers and babies. We're developing a technology, Ollie, completely new sensing techniques to monitor pregnancy and labour progression in a way that actually works around the mother and clinicians in that environment. This involves much more than just a concept that you develop and you take out, machine up, do some circuits, put together and slap on a mother. This takes a lot of due diligence and process into design, testing, actually getting it out into the clinical environments, which we're quite fortunate to have a number of clinical advisors actively working with us across a number of districts to help us get that data and information, which helps us re-input it into our design processes. This is something unique. In New South Wales, we actually have the perfect foundation to be able to do this at a larger scale. We hear lots of stories about companies going internationally and in terms of how Australia operates, but this is something that if we harness properly here in New South Wales, we can do at all levels. We have the skills in terms of the engineers that are here and developing. If they have points they can go to extend their understanding, apply their skills, as our fantastic team here is doing today, then that next step is going to encourage that innovation, which in turn is going to actually help clinicians and help healthcare outcomes here locally. That is something I see this centre and everything Daryl and Les are working towards helping us with today. So thank you all for being here and supporting.
Thank you, Sarah, and congratulations to yourself and Tara and the Baymatob team. We were speaking before about the importance and the opportunity of bringing students into the research space, and I think the Baymatob story is inspirational and a great one to take to our students, and particularly in the STEM space. So thank you for your comments, and again, I think reinforcing. Many of the things that Hugh said, everything is here in New South Wales and in Australia, but there's things we've got to do to make it happen. So some final messages from me. The Centre for Robotics and Health Technology is open and operating, and it has been for some time. You heard Les talk about that. In fact, in its original form, it's been operating for many years in the field of surgical robotics, and we've had tremendous support, long-term support from Tony and Ron Perrich, with philanthropic help in that space, which has enabled Les and the team to do some quite remarkable things. Within the centre, we've built some important capabilities, but we know to succeed, and you heard this message again and again, that we need to bring together the many skills, the many minds, the many experts in this field. And to that end, we now have an array of partnerships and collaborations, both international and local, and we'd like to build more, and they can come in all different forms. But certainly these include researchers, they include research institutes and research organisations. Les mentioned universities. I think important to call out 2 precincts in our district. So the Liverpool Innovation Precinct is developing very quickly and doing some great work. And Campbelltown Precinct is coming along very nicely as well. It's a little earlier, but... And then in the industry space, again, Les touched on that. We're working with many multinationals and local companies, but also with companies that aren't in the healthcare space. And that's a very interesting space because they just need an entry into health and some help and guidance. I think sometimes they're a little wary of it because, and probably rightly so, because there's a patient at the end of that. So that's a role for us to help, because I think Hugh mentioned, in many ways, robotics outside healthcare is a long way ahead of what's occurring in healthcare. In healthcare, I should say. And there's many other organisations that are doing great work in this space that we're partnering with. As I hope you can tell, as we're our speakers, we're passionate about solving issues, health issues in this space, and we invite researchers, innovators, startups, local companies, multinationals, anyone working in this space to come and partner with us. And I promise you we will welcome you with open arms, and if we need to draw other partners in, which I'm sure in many cases we will, or if you want to bring other partners, you know, that to us makes perfect sense. So if I could close by again thanking our speakers. Thank you to Hugh and to Les and to Sarah. A big thanks to the Baymatob team, to Sarah and Tracy. Tracy must have opened the door 50 times for us this morning. And to Tara for hosting us. And it's been a very nice place, as I said, to host this event. To Ali for organising the event, and for Brick Studios, who we used for our awards night our awards event last week, a virtual event, for providing the AV. And to our audience in particular, thank you for joining. We know it's a very busy time of the year, and you've probably been doing a lot of Zooms and virtual events, but we're delighted that you could join us. And on behalf of the Ingham Institute, we wish you a wonderful Christmas, New Year break. I'm sure everybody is ready for it, and it's certainly well deserved. And again, thank you for joining us today and making this event a success. Thank you.